What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you guys are new here, my name is TATIANNAANESA. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below and join the fam. If you guys are returning, what is up, you guys? I am super excited for today's video. I know it's been a couple of days since I posted a video, but you guys, these end of the year videos take a little bit of time, so I kind of had to make sure I had my thoughts together, and I really had to go through my entire collection and separate all these products. For today's video, we are starting out with eyeshadow palettes. This video is strictly on eyeshadow palettes. These palettes I'm going to be sharing with you guys in today's video are my favorites from 2021. Of course, a couple of these palettes did come out last year, but if they are in this video, it is because I did get them this year. So I'm super excited to dive into today's video. But without further ado, let's get into my 2021 eyeshadow palette favorites. Okay, this is literally a side note, but I literally woke up this morning. This is my pajamas. I'm still in my pajamas, and I was like, you know what? I am not putting on a whole outfit. I did my makeup. I was like, you know what? This is kind of cute. I kind of like this vibe, the pink, the bright pink, you know? So we're just gonna stick with it. But yeah, so let's go ahead and get into it. I honestly was super surprised with my picks for this end of the year video, just because I was like, hold up. I have tried so many palettes this year. You guys have seen them all, but I'm like, the ones that I have constantly pulled from and stuck with are the ones that are literally my favorite. So I'm like, okay, I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised, you know? Let's go ahead and start off with Glam Light, okay? Let me get this together. Glam Light did come out with quite a few palettes this year, but honestly, 3 of them really stuck out to me. The first one being the Chocolate Martini palette. This one is from the Glam Light Happy Hour collection. This is a very neutral palette, but it is honestly so beautiful. Every time I wear this palette, I get compliments, and people are always asking what's on my eyes, what am I wearing, and this palette right here is always the palette. I just think it's such a gorgeous neutral palette, but it's also not your typical neutral. It's a neutral that you really wouldn't expect. There's not many neutral palettes like this one out there. There's a ton of different shimmers. I kind of literally gravitate to the same shades in this palette, not gonna even lie. There are these 3 shades right here that I'm always gravitating to, but I love the mattes in this palette because they are really gorgeous mattes to do your everyday all matte kind of look, and I think that's why I really love it, and I literally just fell in love with this palette. The next palette that is my favorite from this year from Glam Light is the Wine palette. And if you guys were wondering what is on my eyes, it is this palette right here. I am obsessed with this purple palette. It is absolutely beautiful. I am literally blown away by this palette. I just love the different tones of purple in this palette, but not only that, I just love that when you put it on the eyes, it's the exact same color that you see in the pan. It literally does not translate as a different color. On my eyes, one thing I love about it is that you can literally pinpoint every single purple, different shade of purple in my eye look from this palette. If you love purple, I really think you're gonna love this palette if you decide to pick it up. Or if you already have this palette, then you already know how good of a palette it is, and that what I'm saying is literally no surprise to you. So the last palette from Glam Light that I wanted to share with you guys is probably gonna be no surprise to you guys, because this palette literally took the internet by storm, and that is the Glam Light X Mikayla palette. Honestly, you guys, this palette right here has been through so much. It has been with me everywhere. When we evacuated from the hurricane, I brought this palette. I literally was like, this is literally all that I need, because there are all of my gorgeous colorful shades, because you guys know I'm a color girl. I love my color on my eyes, but also I have my two rows of neutrals, and I also feel like this palette is just so well thought out. My favorite shades to pair are literally purple and green, and there's so many purple and green shades in here. This palette is gorgeous. As you guys can see, I have literally tapped into this palette so much. You guys can see all those dips in my shimmer shades. I'm obsessed. My favorite shade in this palette is this one right here. It's the shade Audrey. I'm gonna swatch that one for you guys. Audrey and Nas are my 2 favorite shades in this palette. They are beautiful shades. So here are the 2 right here. I'm like, oh my god, which one did I swatch? I'm like, where is it? These 2 right here are literally my favorite shades. I love this shade. I love putting it all over the lid. It's absolutely beautiful. I'm obsessed with this palette. Literally every time I wear that palette, people are asking me, what am I wearing in public? And when I tell them, they're still like, wait, what's that? And I'm like, honestly, really shocked that they don't know about it. But yes, like seriously, this is my favorite palette. And honestly, I am just obsessed and blown away. Let's go ahead and get into Colourpop, because honestly, you guys, I literally was so shocked by my choices for this year, because we all know Colourpop has come out with literally so many palettes this year, so many collections. Oh my gosh, it was hard for me to keep up. I remember when beginning of the year, I literally would buy every single Colourpop, like something from every collection. I literally would go on the site at 12 on a Thursday and I would buy the new product or the new like release that day. And throughout the year, I literally was like, you know what? I do not need everything that Colourpop comes out with. Literally start to curate what you wear, what you don't wear, you know, like literally buy the things that you want to buy. So I kind of definitely did do that. I did start to be like really, really picky with the products that I bought from Colourpop. You guys started to see my Colourpop reviews kind of like become a little bit sparse. I never reviewed every single collection because honestly, a lot of the stuff, I'm like, I don't even pull from it. So I'm like, I'm not gonna buy it. I wanted it at the time, but then when after I was done reviewing it and play with it a couple times, I forgot about it. So I don't know if it's because I was getting overwhelmed or what, but now I have literally just been buying the things that really, really, I'm like, oh, I like that. You know what I mean? So the first palette that caught my eye that I just was so obsessed with, and I still am obsessed with to this day, because I think as of right now, it is my favorite 30 pan palette from Colourpop. It is the It's a Mood palette. You guys, this palette is absolutely beautiful. I literally love everything about this, and I honestly think I love this palette because it does remind me of the Mikayla palette, especially like those purples, those greens, and those blues. I think honestly those are like my favorite colors to put on the eyes. I love how well they pair together as well, but I just think this is such a beautiful fall palette. You also can get really cool shades for the winter time as well. I have not put this palette back into my eyeshadow palette collection. It has stayed with me everywhere. Literally everywhere. It's been up here the entire time. I keep it right up here on my desk. The next Colourpop palette is the Tinkerbell palette. This is the Sprinkle a Little Magic palette. I love this collaboration from Colourpop. This was my favorite collaboration they did this year. They have done so many collaborations, but the Tinkerbell one literally was my favorite. It still is my favorite one from this year. It's just really pretty. If you love greens, I think you would really like this palette a lot. First of all, the packaging is so cute. Oh, I love the packaging on this. I used to be obsessed with Tinkerbell, so this was a collection I was not gonna skip. But honestly, in this entire collection, the palette is my favorite thing, and I think it's been like marked down significantly on the Colourpop site, so like, you know, don't wait too late to get it. The next Colourpop palette is the Lush Life palette. I love this palette so much. Oh my gosh, this is my favorite like summertime release from Colourpop. Like I feel like, oh my god, I kind of low-key did pick a palette from every season that I love from Colourpop unintentionally. But this was my favorite summer release. I love this palette. I feel like this is one of those palettes where it's like the packaging literally matches what's in the inside of the palette. You're not like blindsided, like, oh my god, that doesn't really go. I don't really like that. You know what I mean? Like, okay, but where's the color? You know, I wasn't like that with this palette. I literally felt like I had the color, the jungle, you know, the rainforest. I said the jungle. The rainforest is definitely represented in this palette. I love it. I just love everything about this. I love the packaging. I love the color story. I've created some really gorgeous looks with this palette, and I have just been obsessed. Yeah, next palette, which I only have 2 more Colourpop palettes, surprisingly, is the Orchid You Not palette. I talked about this recently in one of my videos. This palette is a beautiful purple palette. You guys know purple is my favorite color to put on my eyes, hence this nice, really bold purple that I'm wearing today. But this one is a more muted purple. It's not super, super bright. It's not intimidating. I feel like it's a gorgeous night out kind of purpley vibe that we get with this palette. It's just really, really beautiful. And I'm obsessed with this palette. The last palette is a palette that honestly not a lot of people talked about, and I'm really shocked that I love this palette so much. I did film a review on it, but I never posted it because I didn't like the quality at the time. It was like right when I was like trying to figure out my new filming space. I just was not feeling it, so I never posted it. But we're gonna talk about it today, and it's the Plush Like Me palette. First of all, the packaging on this palette is so beautiful. I love the like raised 3D texture. I love that you can kind of feel like, you know, the plush on this, which is cool. It kind of feels like velvet, like faux velvet. It's a very muted color story. It looks super, super light on camera, but when I tell you guys, I create the most beautiful all matte everyday kind of looks with this palette. I love it. The mattes in here are my favorite. They're like really nice, cool tones. I don't usually wear cool tones, but they're like cool, warm tones, if that makes sense. And that's why I really, really love it. I have dipped into this palette quite a lot. I just love every look that I get with this palette. It's such an unpopular Colourpop palette that a lot of people don't talk about, or yeah, literally a lot of people don't talk about this palette, but I seriously, seriously love this one. It is so beautiful. So the next palette I want to talk about is a palette that I was just, oh, I'm still obsessed with. It's my favorite from the Norvina line. It is the Volume 5 palette. And of course, it is a purple palette. Of course, like, come on. This palette is my favorite from the ABH Norvina line. I feel like if you love purple, this is a really gorgeous, gorgeous palette to have. I feel like Norvina literally knocked it out of the park with this palette. This palette is just so beautiful. I love the browns. I love the purples. I love the pops of pink as well. I just love everything about this palette. It's stunning. If you have been wanting to try the Norvina line, this is like if you like can't decide on which one, like you want all of them but you don't know which one to get first, I get this one first, honestly, because it is just beautiful. It's so well thought out and the quality on this is super amazing. I have a review on this palette if you guys are interested. Next palette I want to talk about is from Morphe. Now Morphe came out with a lot of palettes that I really, really love, but honestly my favorite from the year literally has been the Jaclyn Divine Neutrals palette. What? I know, like I love the Mickey palette, like don't get me wrong, I love that palette so much, but it is at the end of the day a typical rainbow palette. And I know what you're probably thinking, girl, this is a typical neutral palette. Yes, that is true, but if you guys know me, I don't usually wear neutrals, and if I could find a neutral palette that I love, that I literally have like use all the time, and it's the first neutral palette that pops into my head when I want to do a neutral look, then it left an impact on me, if that makes sense. And this is the one that definitely did that. The Divine Neutrals palette from Jaclyn, honestly, out of all of her palettes, which is literally 3 in total, this one's my favorite. I feel like it's just so beautifully thought out. It's so gorgeous. I literally love how it goes from light to dark. I also love that there's the corresponding shimmers in this palette as well that also correlate with the matte, and it goes super deep as well. I just think this is just such a good, easy one and done palette. You literally could take the matte shade, put it in the crease, and then literally take the corresponding shimmer on the lid, and you have the most perfect, perfect eye look. I love this palette. It's so compact. Literally when I go out of town, I literally take this palette and that's it. I just love palettes that are convenient, you know, and they also leave an impact on me and my makeup looks, if that makes sense. The next palette I want to talk about that's in my 2021 favorites is from Natasha Denona. This was my very first Natasha Denona I ever tried. Yeah, which is crazy, but I'm so happy I did because once again, it is that really beautiful, beautiful pinky mauve kind of color story, and that's the Natasha Denona Retro palette. This palette is beautiful. I have a full review on this palette as well. This palette prompted me to buy other Natasha Denona palettes. I have 4 palettes in total from Natasha Denona, and it's all because I fell in love with this palette. The quality, the formula, how it blends, how pigmented it is, literally prompted me to want to try all of her other palettes. Now I feel like I collect Natasha Denona palettes, which is weird, but I never thought I would. All right, let's get into one of my favorite brands, and that is Beauty Bay. You guys, if you guys have been following me for a while, or if you guys have really been like, you know, very much like into my videos lately, you guys always see me talk about Beauty Bay. Any chance that I get, I talk about Beauty Bay. I talk about their products, and honestly, Beauty Bay is probably the brand that stuck out to me the absolute most. Second would be Huda Beauty this year, but Beauty Bay literally was always on my radar. I was always super excited about what they're gonna come out with, what's next, what am I gonna try, and honestly, Beauty Bay and Huda Beauty are the two brands in this video and this year that I have loved the most palettes in, and I've also really been obsessed with. Truly, like they're my top standout brands of this year. So I literally have 5 Beauty Bay palettes that I have loved. I think it was like literally all 5 that came out this year. But I love them all. You guys know I love them. So the first one is the Age of Opulence palette. I did not do a video on this, but I did have this palette on in my purchase or pass video, I think. And you guys were commenting on the blue on my lids, and that blue literally is this one right here from the Age of Opulence palette. Now, one thing about Beauty Bay, you guys, is that if you like a palette, if you love the palette, do not wait to get it, because they do not keep their palettes on their site. When they say limited edition, they're limited edition. They are not restocking, and sometimes you never know if they're gonna restock or not without it being limited edition. So if you see it, get it. It's so affordable. Their palettes range from 15 to 20. But their collab, which I'm going to talk about, is $40, but it's worth it. Their collabs are all, like, typically more than $20. But yeah, so this palette right here is really gorgeous. This blue right here is called Revival. Oh my God, stunning. And we have some really gorgeous purpley shades in here, some really gorgeous golds. This palette is inspired by the 1920s, well, the roaring 20s, that kind of vibe and things like that. I love it. This palette is really rich in tones. I just love every time that I use a Beauty Bay palette, my look stands out, and it's so eye-catching. That's the word. It's super eye-catching, and I love palettes that do that, because I love a palette that helps like to, you know, amp up, you know, everything, you know. I love it. I love. I'm going to just swatch these for you guys, because I feel like I am going to include some swatches, close-ups of these palettes, but I just want to swatch this live on camera so you guys can see the quality of Beauty Bay's shimmers. They're really intense. All right, so the next Beauty Bay palette is the new Romantic palette. I think they discontinued this, but this was their Valentine's Day palette. I think this was this year's palette. I think it was. It's been a year. It's been a year. But this palette is beautiful because of all the pinks and the, you know, all the pinky tones. I'm not going to spend too much time on this palette because, like I said, they do not sell this one anymore, but this was my favorite. And it did come out this year, and it definitely was worth, like, mentioning in today's video. The next one is the Wilderness palette. Oh my gosh, I remember this was like, people were like so upset they didn't restock it fast, and they just thought it was not coming back. Then they ended up restocking this palette, and then now I have no idea if it's still available. I love this palette because this reminds me of the Colourpop Lush Light palette. I'm seeing a trend with myself here. It's beautiful. I love those earthy tones. I love those jungle looking tones. Stunning. This is another one of those palettes where it's like, wow, like the color story is beautiful, and it's so different from anything else we have, you know, in our collections. Next Beauty Bay palette is the Fiery 2.0 palette. This one right here is so beautiful. I love this. If you love warm tones, girl, can we just like take a second? Can we take a second to talk about the Beauty Bay Fiery 2.0 palette? Because girl, I have never seen another palette that looks like this. When I see Fiery, this is literally what I get. I love that there's the warm browns, like 2 rows of browns. You have your oranges, you have your yellows, you have your reds, you also have your burgundies, your black. Hello, we have a black in the palette. Like, come on, you guys know I love that. But I love this palette. My favorite shade in the palette is this one right here, and this yellow shade. I have gotten so many compliments on my eye look from both of these shades. You guys, they're stunning. I live for this palette. And then the last Beauty Bay palette that is in my favorites for this year is the new collab palette with Jade from Little Mix. Ever since this palette came out, I literally have not used another rainbow palette. This one is so beautiful. You literally have everything you could want in this palette. Need I say more? I have a review on this if you guys want to check it out. I did a really cool Tweety Bird inspired look in that video, which I'm super proud of. I love. We have our oranges, we have our yellows, we have our purples, we have our pinks, blues, greens, reds. Literally we have our burgundies. We have literally everything in this palette. I think if you want to try a Beauty Bay palette and you don't know what to get, I think the best one that you get a lot for to like try out everything is this one. Though it is a palette where it's literally like the colors are all over the place, you still have every single color you could ever need. You could go neutral, you can go colorful the next day. Literally this palette is just stunning and I highly recommend it. We're getting down to the last couple of palettes, you guys. There are some other palettes I really wanted to include in this video, but they're super, super new and I can't really say that they're like my favorites, even though I really, really like them, even though I kind of really want to put it in this video. Okay, I think I will. So we're gonna get into Huda Beauty because I love my Huda Beauty palettes. They are so good and I have 5 that are my favorites, but these right here are literally so beautiful. These right here are the Obsessions palettes. All 3 that I have are literally so good. I'm always raving about them. I'm always talking about them. Any chance that I get, you guys see me talking about this palette, like these palettes. I love it. So this one is the Wild Chameleon one. This one's so perfect. I use this so much in the summertime. Those shimmers, really, really beautiful. I love this palette so much. Then we have the Wild Jaguar palette, and when I tell you this literally adds so much to my collection, it's so different, and I've had so much fun playing with this. I just find that this palette is just really, really stunning, and it really does add something different to my collection as well. Then we have the Wild Python palette, and these blues in here, I am obsessed with. I'm just speeding through these palettes because I do have a literal, like a review on these palettes if you guys are interested. Because I don't want this video to be super long that you guys lose interest in these palettes, like, you know, in the video. So I'm just speeding through these. The quality is great. I know a lot of people say Huda Beauty's Obsession palettes can be a hit or miss, but these are literally a hit, not a miss. Next 2 palettes are Huda Beauty's bigger palettes, and this is one that came out last year, but I got it this year and I love it. Literally, I have been using this palette every single day when I don't want to do looks like this, when I want something simple but still like really, really sultry, but like, you know what I mean? This one is the Huda Beauty Naughty palette, and if you love nudes and neutrals, but you love warm tones, this one is the best palette. This one came out last year, so I feel kind of like sad that I'm like talking about it in this video this year, but I did get it this year, and I just want to like spread some light on this palette because I love it. It's my favorite big Huda Beauty palette, like hands down. And then of course the last palette, the last one, is the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz palette. I love this palette. It's so beautiful. I think the shimmers and the different textures are my favorite thing about this palette. I do have to pull from other like matte shades to like get the look that I have in my mind, but as far as like the shimmers, this palette is so worth it just from those. I literally love this palette. It's so beautiful, so well thought out, and I am just obsessed with this. I'm just obsessed with Huda Beauty. She literally killed it this year. I think that she was like the #1, like ranked as the #1 beauty brand in the world or something like that. I believe it. I believe it. I really do. And then I just have one more palette I want to share with you guys, and it is from Makeup by Mario. So this palette right here is the Master Mattes palette. I think this came out last year, but I did get it this year. I love this palette for literally anything. Mattes are a necessity for an eye look. This palette right here is so good. It's just literally my like everything palette. This is like my like emergency palette when I really need a certain shade or a certain matte. I have this palette. I just think it's like an essential to have in your collection, to have like a part of like your everyday looks. It's just an essential palette and I love it. I got it this year, so I wanted to like shed some light on it, even though, you know, it's my favorite. So yeah. These are my favorite palettes of 2021. I know there were so many that came out, and that does not mean I did not like the other palettes that I didn't talk about in this video that I've talked about or reviewed on my channel, but it just means these are the palettes that really stood out to me, the ones I use the absolute most, and the ones I just literally have fallen in love with. That is it for today's video. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye guys.